Good morning. It is Tuesday, January 20th. Senate Agriculture. We're going to spend some time talking about some solar on prime ag land in Vermont. And I'd like to start off this morning, first day, and introducing the committee.
Yep, Senator Collmore, representing the Rutland District. And I'm Rob Plunkett, Senator Beckley District.
Senator Heckerman from the Addison County District.
Senator Major from Windsor.
Senator Russ Ingles from Essex Orleans.
Linda Lehman, it is.
So we're going to start off with a conversation with Peter Sterling. And welcome. The floor is yours, sir.
Hi, my name is Peter Sterling, Executive Director of Renewable Energy Vermont. We're the trade association that represents all of the businesses doing work here in Vermont to bring on new renewable energy. We've been in red since 2021, and just as a little history prior to that, I was the chief of staff to Tim Ash here in the Senate. So I was the Ashley, although Ashley's way better. Really, we went more together. So thank you for inviting me to talk a little bit about solar power here in Vermont and what it's doing on ag lands there. Slideshow, great. All the information in this slide deck, by the way, is publicly available. So none of this comes from our numbers. It's all stuff that's either at the PUC or with USDA or the Department of Agriculture. Okay, so in the first slide, just as background, Vermont has about 1 million acres of prime ag soils. Just thought I'd throw that up there as a start. So anytime we're talking about, a solar array going up, or anything going up, it eats into potentially could eat to that million acres of prime ag soils. Just as a reference point, to meet Vermont's, we have renewable energy requirements here in Vermont. We have a law that says we have to purchase renewable energy. There's an in-state requirement and those are limited to 5 megawatts. Those 5 megawatt arrays, the rule of thumb is it's about 5 acres per megawatt. So when we hear about a 5 megawatt array, that's about 25 acres of land in total. Yeah, a 2 megawatt array, that's about 10 acres. So we're putting up about in-state, to meet that in-state only requirement, we're putting up about 28 megawatts, but a bunch of that goes on rooftops. We're probably putting up, I don't know, maybe five of those dream projects a year, 6 of them a year. So yeah, but we can go into that more. Okay, next slide. I went through all the CPG applications for solar projects to meet those in-state renewable energy requirements. Between 2023 and 2025, 47 acres of prime ag soils were within the area of disturbance for solar, the smaller solar arrays, 150 kilowatts to 500. 371 acres of prime ag soils were within the area of disturbance for solar arrays. The bigger projects, the 500 kWs up to 5 megawatts. I just want to point out that land that's in these applications that are cited as within the area of disturbance doesn't actually mean they get plowed up. They're just within like the giant fenced-in area. So it doesn't mean like a road is going to. They could still be in a part of a field. You just fenced it off because you don't want people near there. So also, Vermont has a law that all prime ag soils, when they're on a site for solar, the soils have to be stored on site. So if you're, have to grade something out, you don't take that soil and ship it somewhere. You pile it into a berm on the site. So within 25 years, when the solar array could be decommissioned, you want that land to go back to ag. The conditions of the CPGR, you got to push that soil back onto the land. So prime ag soils are not like put in a landfill or into a quarry or anything like that. And again, just as context here, according to the 2022 USDA Ag Census, between 2017 and 2022, Vermont lost 19,547 acres of land and farms, an average of 3,900 acres per year. So we're losing about 3,900 acres a year of ag land, according to at least what's been, for permits being filed for solar over the last 5 years. We lost about 400 acres to solar. So you can see the land is clearly being, if you're looking at what the main threat to ag land is, of that 3,900 acres a year, most of it is probably going to other developments other than
We're gonna talk about them too, Peter.
Okay.
We're,
Oh, yeah.
you know, I mean, it's not just, we're not just picking on the solar,
Oh, I know.
and, you know, I mean, and I think we've had this conversation and we don't have a bill yet, but we're just kind of going around and talking to a lot of folks. And, you know, we have plenty of land in Vermont not to impede with what you guys want to do. It's just not
Yeah.
the land that you guys want to build on. A little bit more costlier, we get that, but just across from the fence, from where you want to go, there's other perfectly
Yeah, yeah.
good lands. And here's the biggest point.
Yeah.
It also helps farmers out because this land, when you have a 1,000-acre farm and 250 of it's prime ag land and you have 750 acres, that is really not much left. Well, that land becomes more valuable if you guys decide that you want to build on it.
Yeah.
And it helps that farmer when it's all said and done as well to take that land that was worth $1,000 an acre and maybe make it worth $5,000 an acre.
Yeah, yeah.
So it is all about supporting
Yeah.
farmers and the content stuff.
Yeah. So I'm just giving you numbers. You know,
Yeah.
y'all can do it. I'm not really feeling picked on. I know there's.
No, and I just really
Yeah.
wanted to I want everybody to hear, you know, what we're thinking and
Yeah.
why we're thinking and be
Yeah.
fair with everyone.
All right, next slide. Just another quick number from the American Farmland Trust. These are the numbers we see out there the most. American Farmland Trust predicts about 41,000 acres of ag land will be converted to development in Vermont by 2040 versus about 1,200 acres for solar. Again, it just shows you where most of the stuff is. And happy to let you digest that one, but then I have two more slides and then we can chat if we want. And then one of the bigger picture things that I always think is important to remember, next slide, is when Vermont puts up solar, at some point it displaces a natural gas plant that's elsewhere in New England. And in that lower right corner, you can see a map. That map goes from the State House down to up the hill to National Life there, all the way down to the Shaw's downtown and the library. That's 60 acres. That's the size of a natural gas plant. There are 64 of them in New England. None of them are in Vermont. I think you would imagine you would have a very difficult time siting a 60-acre natural gas plant in Vermont. When we put up a solar in Vermont, we displace the use of those plants. I think it's super important to remember when we generate our own power, we are asking basically low-income and minority communities where all those are sited to not have to live next to one of those things in, you know, Connecticut, Massachusetts, primarily some are in New Hampshire, but those are massive plants that we rely on for power. We don't have enough energy, and none of them are in Vermont. So there is there's another good kind of ethical reason to go solar here in Vermont that I think is worth discussing. In the last slide, so one other way we could help improve open space in Vermont is by supporting the net metering program. The net metering program is the program that allows Vermonters to go solar at home. These are all on-site projects, meaning they have to be either on your roof or adjacent to your house. Net metering. There were 5 CPG applications for the bigger 150 to 500 kW projects, like on that barn. You could offset a 5 megawatt solar array with about 5 of those big projects and about 150 smaller residential projects. Senator Ann Watson has introduced S170 to help make net metering more affordable for more people. So if we want to, one of the best ways we can protect our open spaces and generate energy is by driving it into the already built environment, like on a barn roof or a home roof or over a parking lot. But that requires a vibrant net metering program, which has been in decline for the last few years. We could discuss that, but there are other ways to preserve open spaces by driving our solar production to the already built environment. And just before I take questions, let me just ask perspective. The chair, you mentioned something about farmers and solar and how it makes their land more valuable. Most farmers lease their land when they go solar. They don't sell it outright. And those lease deals, they can vary, but they really are at a baseline like $1,000 an acre.
Right.
So if you want a 2 megawatt array on your place and you give up 10 acres for that, $10,000 a year. I'm not saying for doing nothing, but
My point is that they have other land that you can go on and you're still gonna pay that.
Yeah.
So that's my point.
Yeah. And I will say this, my last thought on this is, so I've been, like I said, I've been at Rev for 4 years, and before that, I was here in the building, and I was pretty close to Senator Bobby Starr. I really liked him. We talked all the time. As those of you who knew Bobby, like he told you what he thought. Really did. Mince words. Bobby never once said the problem our farmers have is they're being driven off the land by solar. If there was, we would have had a bill that stopped it. So I think Bobby knew. We didn't hear it in the Senate. I've certainly not heard it read from farmers that the threat of solar development is what's making it harder for them to keep their land open and keep the farms active. I only hear about the threat of solar on farmland mostly from third-party people who don't like to look at it. Now, wind is different. I think wind, a lot of people have much stronger feelings, and I get that part of it. But if you're literally looking at who gets the most upset about solar on ag land, it isn't the farmers. It is other people around them. In my experience, both working here and in like 5 years now, Brad. Thank you.
Yes, you're very welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So we're saying we're displacing a natural gas plant. How many acres of solar would it take to get rid of one plant?
Well, you wouldn't be able to do it you would need a lot of acres of solar. So if you needed, I could do the exact math, but basically those gas plants are like 350 megawatts.
And that's constant.
And that's, I was going to say the capacity factor of that thing is like 50%. To get, the capacity factor of solar, which is what we need to figure out how much is about, 20% for those big ones in the field. So you would need, many, many hundreds of megawatts of solar to completely get rid of a gas plant. But most of us who work in this renewable sector don't envision a world where, especially at this latitude where we have so much snow cover and cloud cover, you would do it with solar. You would need to bring on batteries. That would help a lot. If those offshore wind turbines come online, that will also greatly offset those gas plants. Honestly, and I know onshore wind is controversial, but there's a lot of that wind is being built in Quebec that I think we're going to get soon. We could have wind turbines here. You have to do a bunch of different things to completely get rid of a natural gas plant. You can never do it all with solar.
And my drive is that the likelihood of us ever getting rid of one of those plants is probably not going to happen because we have winter. You might not have a nice sunny year, and that it's not as reliable as even wind is not as reliable. It doesn't say, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but when you come in and say, hey, we're going to displace a natural gas plant, that's not a true statement. It's still going to be there. The nice thing is we might not be relying as much on it. And getting to your point, I know many farmers that are happy that they hey, I don't really use this land. It's not great land. I do want to put a solar field here. I can give you 4 or 5 farmers that did that. It's like I agree with you. It's usually the third party that comes in. I don't like looking at it.
Yeah. Just to be clear, what I said earlier in my testimony was, I never said if we put up a solar panel in Vermont, that gas plant will close down.
No,
I said it displaces the power from you. That plant doesn't necessarily have to run 365, 24/7. It could run 300 days a year, which is a big deal. If you live next to that plant, that's 65 days less of that stuff pumping out gas. So I'm just saying it displaces the power, which means it has to run less. That's just to be clear what I said. But the other part is I do think when you look at the people who are planning for New England's energy future, because that's our grid is New England, they're not bringing on new natural gas plants because they think the wind is coming, the batteries are coming, there's offshore wind coming. So we are in a way, by building more renewables, we're also stopping the construction of a new natural gas plant, which is to me very, very meaningful. It speaks well to the technology, how it's evolving. But you're right. My guess, if you were to ask me to bet my nickel, I would say that New England will never have 0 natural gas plants, but we can tamp it down to where they're not running very often. And I think that is a very laudable goal to have, especially since we would never build one in Vermont.
And I have not a problem of renewable energy. I think it's really part of the mix. So it's about where you cite it. And I want you guys to work a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Not only you,
Yeah.
but the housing folks, anybody who wants to get on this nice flat field that's going to grow food in perpetuity for the rest of the world and ourselves. I just want you guys to, you get a lot of breaks. I mean, you get a lot of tax breaks that you have. You don't really have to pay much taxes on the land that you're sitting on. You pay one little small little fee, and then for the rest of the time, you're not paying any school tax. That's all good stuff. I mean, you get a lot of breaks for that, and I'm okay with that. I really, really am. Let's keep all that stuff in place. It's just like you a little bit different. You guys just work a little bit harder, because you might have to forego 1 year's worth of profits to put it someplace else where you don't want to put it, or whatever that might be. I'm fine. I get it. I mean, there's just a lot of things in life that you agree with or don't agree with. I'm not going to fight against renewable energy. I'm not. I'm not going to fight about where renewable energy is going, and also where anything that's going to attack a perfectly good field that can grow food forever. Because that I don't care. Once you put something on that, as I think we've had a discussion about it, it doesn't revert back to a farm field ever again. And once it's gone, it's gone. And yeah, I see the TikTok. Well, we're only doing this, we're only doing that. Well, our job in this building is to think about 100 years from now or 200 years from now. And then what do we do when it's all gone? We're not going to go back and chop those things out of there and go on. So the best way to preserve farmland is preserve farmland. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Peter, can you give us a sense of how many panels have been retired? And what exactly happens when they do?
We, I would say a very small fraction of solar arrays have been decommissioned or retired. Most of them are so generous. These things last 25 years. So we didn't build that many in the 90s.
But we have some that are 25 years old.
Yeah.
What happens then?
Okay, so I can tell you what happens then, but just say as of today, a tiny fraction of solar arrays have been actually like decommissioned and taken out of service. No, that's not really happening yet. But a solar panel is about 90% silicon, which is glass, stuff like that. There's like 10% of other stuff. A solar panel is encased in metal. It's like, there's this idea that when you have a car and you see it, it feels like it's like leaking balloons. Cars don't leak unless you start beating on them or something, those engines they hold everything in it. The solar panels like that too. They don't like leak or leach or anything unless like a tree falls on them and then maybe something can come out. But if you take long story short is you can store a solar panel it's like a tire really. If you store a tire in the right spot, it doesn't cause environmental pollution, right? Like a solar panel, even if you have to decommission it and you can't find a place to recycle it, most people are holding them in warehouses now till there's like a proper recycling program, which US EPA is working on. I know ANR has talked to us about a recycling program, but solar panels, even if you do take them off of the roof or out of that field, just store them, they don't do any damage to anything. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So they're not a threat to anything. First, they're 90% glass.
And how many of those panels are owned by Vermonters? In other words, I live down where Connecticut, for some reason, seems to have the rights to a whole bunch of solar fields, and all of that money leaves Vermont.
I don't know who owns a lot of the arrays, who develop, like a lot of like when a Vermont company, almost every array that's put up in Vermont is built by a Vermont company. It's very rare that a company outside doesn't get it. Like Encore or Norwich, Encore is in Burlington, Norwich is out, Norwich, MHG Solar's down there in Bennington. They build it, but most of the time they sell it to someone else. They're just it's like a contractor builds a house. He doesn't own the house. They let somebody else buy the house. So these solar builders, they sell it to whoever wants to buy it. I don't know who owns most of those arrays, but they're all governed by the same Vermont laws as far as decommissioning and recycling. That's all done by state law. So no matter who owns it, you have to do the same thing when the day comes, as far as having a decommissioning fund and remediating the site.
I'm also struck, I at one time spent more time in Florida than I do now. I always have lived in Vermont, however. And I'm struck often by how little solar activity is going on in a state which labels itself as the Sunshine State, and I don't know why.
Well, it's a good news story for Vermont. Our utilities in general are really, really good about being forward thinking. And a bunch of years ago, most of them saw that the future in New England, where natural gas is really expensive, going with wind or solar was going to be cheaper for Vermonters. It's why we have the lowest rates in New England.
I don't believe that, not for 1 minute.
That we have
And
the lowest rates in
natural
England.
gas is not expensive, so, you know.
Well,
When you guys are putting these solar things out and you're charging 21 cents mandated that everybody has to buy solar at 21 cents to put it back on the grid. I get that, it's part of it. But we're buying natural gas driven power out of the Midwest for 6 cents a kilowatt hour. And we are.
well, there's a lot to unpack there, but first, let me just say, one of the things, when you look over the longer, you are right that currently natural gas is like 3 cents an MMBtu, which is really historically cheap. But when you look at the arc of time, the cost of buying power from natural gas increases a lot more than solar. And also right now, solar is being built in Vermont for about 10.5 cents a kilowatt. So, you know, that 21 cents you cited was older net metering rates, but right now utilities are buying 10.5 cents. That is a pretty sweeping deal. And New Hampshire, which has a much different utility market, they rely much more on the spot market and natural gas. So yeah, they sometimes have lower rates, but when natural gas spikes, like it did after Ukraine, you know, everyone's bill went up $70 a month because Vermont regulators have actually the legislature said, let's not deregulate the market. We buy long-term fixed contracts, like either nuclear, Hydro-Quebec, or even solar. Those 20-year contracts over the arc of time are always cheaper than the ups and downs of natural gas. But Florida, those utilities, they make more money by selling their customers power from fossil than they do from renewables.
But they also have
So Florida is
nuclear power plants
Exactly.
that are supplying power at a much cheaper rate, even than what solar can provide.
But
So,
but
you know,
And solar doesn't, what I understand, solar doesn't like extreme heat.
that's definitely correct.
So when you're in the hundreds, it's almost,
Right,
it's,
but Senator Collmore's question was, why is there so much less solar in Florida where it's so sunny all the time than what he sees in Vermont? And the reason was that when a utility makes a capital investment like a power plant, they get an ROI. I don't know what it is in Florida. In Vermont, it's 9%. So if you do a capital investment as a utility here in Vermont, you get a 9% return on investment. When you are talking about $1 billion gas plant, that's a pretty good ROI. So Florida has chosen to invest in building those plants, which profits. They're all for-profit utilities. We only have one for-profit utility. Everything else is either municipally owned or a co-op. Our utilities are generally less profit-driven, and even our one investor-owned utility, Green Mountain Power, generally speaking, is doing a really good job of keeping rates low by, you know, making smart investments. So it's just a different culture of what your utilities want to do. I think Florida is much more profit-driven, and in Vermont, there's more focus on keeping the rates down.
do you believe if that the incentives that Vermont puts out there, we would still have as much solar going on as we do? Because we do make it, like the chair was saying, we do make it pretty enticing for big companies to come in and set up fields. If those were eliminated, do you think it would drastically slow it down?
Oh, 100%. If you were to eliminate the net metering program, you would see very few Vermonters would go solar where they live or where they work. If you were to change the permit fees or the whatever tax structure for current solar, if you were to increase those, that would make, well, what it would do is it would drive up the cost of the projects. So I don't need to be evasive, but there's a difference between the net metering stuff that's on people's roofs and the bigger stuff in the fields, right?
Mm-hmm.
The net metering on the roof, no doubt, if you got rid of the net metering program, nobody would do it, and there would be less solar on people's roofs or parking lots and all that stuff. The bigger stuff in the fields, a little different. And I would encourage you, if you really want to better understand that, talk to the much smarter people at our utilities, whether Green Mountain Power or Burlington Electric or that. My guess is what I think would happen is, because Vermont load is growing, we need to get more power from somewhere. And right now, Hydro-Quebec is pretty much tapped out. They're not selling us any more power. They've been pretty clear. The nuclear plants in our region that are capable of supplying power, all those are contracted out. So we're not getting new hydro or nuclear power in the next 20. So that means you have to find new power either from a gas plant or some wind or solar or something like that. The gas prices, like I said, our utilities are not that interested in buying power from them because it does tend, because it goes up and down, it be more expensive. So what that's my long way of explaining. Most utilities these days in Vermont are seeing the most affordable power that you could bring online the quickest, like 2 years, coming from a solar array in a field. So if you were to make that more expensive, to answer your question, there are a lot of talking, is you can make it more expensive, but I'm not convinced you would build less because I think that's where utilities need to get it from. I think you just raise rates to ratepayers. And I think you should have a utility come in and testify if you're really interested in a detailed answer. Because I think most of them say if you need to procure energy in the next 2 years, you will not get it from any other source in the next 2-3 years other than new solar. There's no gas, nuclear, hydro, offshore wind, stuff like that.
But we do have hydro. All we gotta do is call Hydro Quebec and they're gonna be happy to sell us hydropower. And it's there.
Senator, I gotta disagree with you on
Okay.
that.
We've worked on that on the kingdom
Okay.
as far as doing the bilateral power coming in and all of that stuff.
Okay.
So, but again,
Peter, I have another question, but go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, between President Trump's posture about making Canada the 51st state and just the amount of how much more other states can pay for Hydro-Quebec's power more than Vermont, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, they will always outbid us. Even if there was new power, they will always outbid us for it. And I feel this is not the 1990s when it was 6-cent power. That power that Quebec just sold to New York City through their new power line running down the lake there, that's like, 11 cents. We could never afford to pay that. New York City will always outbid us for any, even if Hydro-Quebec does have new capacity.
That's the difference of millions of people to six.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Hartford, Boston, they will always outbid us for anything that's new from Hydro-Quebec. So, well, we can get you information on that.
So
Yeah.
there's been a lot of talk, well, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration. There's been some talk about the remote nuclear facility.
Yeah.
The smaller
Yeah.
ones. Does REV have a position on whether or not that's a good idea? Seems to me to make a lot of sense.
Sure. I think Rev's position would always be anytime we can get electricity from a source that does not burn fossil fuels, that's a good thing. If it's affordable.
Okay.
However, I would just add that the modular nuclear is still a technology that really doesn't exist in a practical way. Like this idea that you will be able to build a 5 megawatt or a 3 megawatt nuclear plant in modular nuclear, which that's a lot of power. Those things, their capacity factors like 90%. They would generate power all the time, right? But it doesn't exist. And the one that's in development in Idaho, which has been subsidized by the federal government, which is great, it's a prototype. They're not anywhere close to being cost competitive with wind or solar or storing power batteries. So should the technology come to exist where it would be cost competitive, and we have a place to put the waste, I think it's a fantastic idea because we have to stop burning things. If we don't stop burning things, we're going to make more problems for ourselves. But the technology at an affordable price does make sense.
Okay. Thank you.
committee. Again, I want to say that we're not against renewable energy in any way, shape, or form. I want to make that very, very, very clear. Apologize that if it sounds like some of the discussions that we are, certainly for the chair, because I'm not. I am solely focused on absolute positively, no matter whether it's you sitting there or anybody else that wants to grab Vermont's prime ag lands, that we're gonna talk about that.
Well, I just want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for the great questions. And I leave this committee feeling like you all were just asking good questions, kicking the tires and doing your due diligence. I feel like you did a great job in bringing this issue out and asking the right questions. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Sure. Appreciate it. Committee,
I was supposed to be here, sitting right here by 10:30.
okay, want to just wait just a few seconds? Yeah. So Um, and we're online, which I'm very happy to be, but I just did Google about where Vermont's electric rates. Again, that's not the issue. I don't want to make this about the issue. I'm not here to debate the cost of power in Vermont. I'm not. It's part of the conversation that we're having. And I really want to stay focused on it because that's a larger discussion that gets out of our lane, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I know it impacts everyone, and that's not the point that I'm trying to make. And I hope it's very clear to the committee that it really is just about protecting farmland. That's prime ag land. That's where I'm at. So, you know very well that I do not allow politics in the room, and I don't want to break my own rule, because I don't really have a dog in the fight with. Again, my whole purpose is to, you know, see if we could write a bill. I've got a note sitting down here for President Baker. Should I not be here? Sounds like I might be. And one of the questions I would want to ask, the agriculture, agency of ag is what would it look like if we were to, propose a bill in here to prevent all future developments on prime ag land? What would that look like in this state? What type of can of worms are we opening up?
That's a big, yeah,
Well,
I would have a hard time with that myself.
Right, so certainly want to ask the question. And again, that's why we're having the conversation, right? Find some way to get there. I mean, and I hear it. Well, we're only taking this much land. We're only taking that much land. But again, we are responsible for the rest of our lives and everybody else's life forever and a day, as far as to make sure that we are a farming community. So yeah, there's going to be uncomfortable conversations that I want everybody to be part of. And I don't know where I lie on it, other than the fact that I want to protect this land as best we can.
I guess that's why I asked the question. I know there've been panels up for 25 years, and some of them initially probably did go on prime ag. And I want to know whether those panels can be taken down and the ground under it returned to agriculture.
Or will they just renew it with newer panels?
Right, yeah. Well, and they say that it will, but it never does, right? It's never going to come back to the production.
No, it comes down to.
Well, it
Always
does.
that,
Yeah,
always that.
yeah.
So that's why I asked the question of if they weren't getting so many subsidies, would it be going on? And the answer is no.
Right. Or, as I said, I mean, once they're there, they pay a $2,000 fee or whatever it is to the school tax. That's it. They don't have to pay forever and a day in perpetuity like everyone else paid to use that
I
land.
was just gonna say, we have to pay for perpetuity.
No, it's no, exactly. So, but again, only because it's part of the discussion and that comes out. I'm trying to stay best I can away from all of that policy discussion and talk about why we're not.
I see the point you're driving at is that we do have agricultural land that we don't want to lose to development and solar or what have you, other than trying to keep it for vegetable produce, animal production, what have you. And we all see where we want to go with that. It's how do we do it? Because I've been a farmer for all we work. Parents still kind of are for their 90. Dad's in his 90s. He has hundreds of acres that are prime acre. We just did 7 lots that was on prime ag. You hated to see it go that way, but it's like that was his investment for the future.
But again, perfect. I mean, although you described it because it is, but as again, just across from that, there's pasture land that maybe isn't prime, but it could be built upon. It just costs a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so
Not one particular spot, but yes.
but once you open that discussion now, that land starts to become more valuable. Again, you know, so, yes.
Ari's here.
Yeah.
Morning.
Ari, how are you?
Well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Whenever you're ready, come on up.
Okay, sounds good. Coming in from the cold, so.
No problem. Take your time. Take your time. You're early. Take your time. We're all here. We're still live. We haven't gone off. So,
Okay.
we're just having a kind of a wide range of discussion. I can set it up once you're up.
Okay, is that right if I just quickly use the restroom and come back?
Oh, but absolutely, please
so
do,
much. Thank you.
please do, yes.
You said no, you went faster.
A bit more agreeable. And yes, and I get it, that you're, this is gonna create some conversation. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to create some conversation about this and some more awareness. So, and I think that anybody wants to be listening in or anybody's in here, there's no decisions been made, right?
We have the conservation districts tomorrow. That's good.
Anybody else, if we're missing some folks, Linda's doing a great job of,
Yeah.
filling the schedule up. If we're missing some folks, let's get them in. I think, we're gonna start to see some language, fairly quickly, I think, from the agency, as far as, some of the things that we've talked about. So until then, we're just kind of, we're learning, we're filling up, we're learning.
It'll be good to have the farm bureau.
Yes.
I still, we got an ambulance right outside. Pass out during the testimony.
Yeah.
I assume that's only because the governor's day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I thought getting in the building today was a little bit easier than what it has been in the past. I was appreciative of that.
Well, Sergeant Ives was here and she was saying because they have one man. And when they do the single entrance, when they don't have a man.
Yeah.
There's never a problem at 6 a.m. I walk in the Lincoln door and there's no one here. Amazing what you can get done too in that first hour.
It is.
6 to 7, that's the first hour.
Mine. And then people start wandering in. You gotta talk to them.
At 7, they start on.
Yeah, because the cap opens at 7.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
The general public now can't come in until 7:30. Interesting. They moved that half hour. And from what I understand, the reason was they needed to save some money in order to be able to pay people for the single entry. Well, they got more law enforcement, you have to pay. So they took a half an hour. Does make sense.
Which?
Are you good?
Yeah.
Yeah, come on, so you're ready.
That door's still. Appreciate your patience.
Yeah, but it costs more money to have people standing there screening people.
Well, it's locked the building.
Morning.
The state of this morning,
Good morning. We never went off live, but, we have the Agency of Agriculture Food Markets. We have Eric Rockland Miller, Senior Agriculture Development Coordinator. So just to bring you up to speed, Ari, the conversation has started about, concerns about people who are wanting to use, or take over, prime ag land. And so
Right.
we're starting a discussion on that. Where we had so the solar folks and we had Peter Sterling, the Executive Director of Renewable Energy of Vermont. A good conversation. We don't want anybody to think that we're just picking on them. We're also looking at keeping anybody who wants to develop prime ag land from doing so. And not that we want to stifle any development. We just are a firm believer that a lot of these farms have lands that can be developed upon. There would be the old pasture land types,
Right.
areas, and, that does a lot of things. It protects our prime ag land, but also makes that land more valuable that, to those farmers that typically hadn't seen much value in that land. So that's kind of the discussion, where been going. We have made no decisions about anything, just, looking for your knowledge.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and so the committee, I appreciate being here today. It's a cold morning and nice to be warm and cozy in here. So yeah, my name for the record is Ari Rockland Miller, and I'm Senior Agricultural Development Coordinator with the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. And I'm grateful to be here with the committee this morning. Yeah, if it's okay with the committee, I'm going to talk a little bit about primary agricultural soils in general as they're defined in Vermont, and talk a little bit about the different ways the agency reviews and considers impacts to those soils and kind of the framework for mitigating or addressing some of those impacts under both Act 250 criteria 9B, and then also under Section 248 and kind of the solar and renewable energy side of things. And then I'm happy to take any questions, or throughout, feel free to interject with any questions or comments. So I've been working with the agency for about 8 years now, a little over 8 years. And the bulk of my work has been in the Criterion 9B space. Criterion 9B is one of the Act 250 criteria that addresses called primary agricultural soils. And then I've also been enjoying recently working as well with the Section 248 review team as it relates to solar projects, which I understand is one of your interests this morning. So, excuse me, sorry, I'll turn that off. Okay. So the primary agricultural soils as defined in Vermont, the starting point as far as the legal definition, of course, we care about the boots on the ground perspective as well, not just the legal definition, but I thought it'd be helpful to explain kind of the framework, how they're looked at in Vermont. Primary agricultural soils include soils that are rated by the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service as being of prime, statewide, or local importance. So the starting point when we look at is the soil good for ag is the mapping that's been done by the Natural Resources Conservation Service. They've done very thorough mapping. It's quite accurate. Of course, nothing can be perfect as far as it it overlays on the ground reality, but that's kind of the starting point in the analysis. Are these soils rated by USDA as being important farmland? To understand that rating, and anyone can look at this, there's kind of two main tools we use. One is the NRCS Web Soil Survey. It's worth playing around with if you have a minute. You can see where you live and how the soils are rated, the different soil map units as designated by NRCS. And then the other tool, which is pretty user friendly, is the ANR Natural Resources Atlas here in Vermont. So one is kind of a federal tool created by NRCS, and one is our state tool of the ANR Atlas. But both use the same data, the NRCS data. So even the ANR Atlas is looking at the NRCS rankings of these soils. And there are three kinds of soils that are considered primary ag here in Vermont. Prime soils, which are the best of the best and the most finite of all. Statewide importance, which are still overall excellent soils, but they may have some limitations. They might be a little slopier or have a shallower depth to bedrock. They're still great for farming, but not quite as perfect as the prime. And then local importance. So some regions or municipalities have worked, I think, together with NRCS to designate soils that are maybe not otherwise called prime or statewide, but that are used for agriculture in their regions and have a proof of being good ag soils, can get a local designation. And those are also under the law considered a primary agricultural soil. And this is all the definition itself is in Title 10. It's NVSA 6001-15. That's where this is defined. The other thing is that what if you have soils that are good for farming, but they're not rated by NRCS? Because there are some excellent, commercially viable farms that maybe some, but not all of their soil they farmed are actually rated. So the definition of primary ag soils also encompasses soils that are of agricultural importance due to agricultural use. So if they've been used for farming in recent times, or they're actively being farmed, irrespective of the rating, the proof is kind of in the pudding, right? So if they're good soil, they're good soil. So any active farmland or recent farmland can also be considered primary ag soil here in Vermont. Of course, there are many instances of areas where soil could be rated as being statewide or prime, but it might contain a parking lot. So how do we address that? There is a part of the definition saying the presumption is they meet the definition if they're mapped as such, unless the applicant provides evidence they've lost their agricultural potential due to a variety of factors, including the most obvious would be previously constructed improvements like buildings or parking lots or gravel. Other factors could be more site specific or more nuanced, topographic barriers that make access almost impossible and can't be reasonably overcome, things like that. So in our reviews, we kind of look in a practical sense, and if something is a narrow sliver that's less than 100 feet wide that no tractor could ever access and it's been shoehorned by development on every side, a sliver between buildings, maybe that does not meet the definition anymore. But the starting point is that the soils that are mapped do meet the definition. So that's kind of the presumption until someone proves otherwise. So that's what the primary ag soils are. And they usually have an agricultural value group rating. 1 is the best of the best. This is an NRCS designation, so a Natural Resources Conservation Service. 1 is the best of the best. 2 and 3 are also stellar prime soils. And all the way up to 7 is still considered statewide or primary agricultural soil. Once you get to 8 and above, it's considered usually NPSL, not prime, statewide, or locally important, as rated. But again, if it's being farmed, it can still be the definition. So that's kind of the framework.
Can you say that one more time?
Absolutely, yeah. The numbers or so 1, 2, and 3 being the primest of prime, 1 being the best of the best, and then all the way up to 7 typically still being a primary agricultural soil, and then 8 and above is usually NPSL, not prime, statewide, or locally important. But even an ag value 10, which is not a great soil,
But it still can be.
it still could be, if it's being farmed, then we still consider it important. So there are, of course, there's beautiful flat river bottom kind of valley land, which can be great for farming, but also can have flood risks. But we also have hill farms in Vermont. There are farms that are farming pretty slopey land and pretty bedrocky land. It's amazing the ingenuity of farmers to grow food and graze animals and some complicated situations. So we like to recognize that even the soils that are NPSL is rated, in some cases could still be important farmland if they have a history of being farmed and really producing crops or grazing animals. So that's kind of the definition.
How many acres in Vermont are prime ag land?
I'd be happy to get you that figure. I don't have it memorized, but we definitely could get that to you. Yeah, thank you. Happy to follow up on that. Yeah.
Hey, Ari, can you give us an idea of county by county, who's got the most prime ag land, based on the 14 counties? And how is it mapped? I know, not to drag the 3-acre rule into this conversation, but most of the research there was done by drones. And I think there's some issues with that. If you're way up and you look down, it really is not that clear what that is. So how much of that was done that way or actually walking the land?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, as far as the county by county, I also don't have that memorized. I could definitely infer that Addison County has a lot of rated primary ag land. Franklin County, Chittenden County, I mean, it's losing a lot of it, but actually as mapped has some pretty great soils, like almost all South Burlington, Dorset Street area. That's a lot of a big corridor of primary ag soils, for example. There are ag soils and, every county has them. I was recently reviewing a project near Killington and, in some of the more mountainous regions, there still are pockets of mapped soils, but maybe less abundant. But I'd be happy to get you the specific, analysis by county. I could work with a GIS, get that data. So I don't know the exact ranking, those right instances, some of the ones that have more, but every county has at least primary ag soils. And as far as how the mapping is done, I don't do it myself, so I don't have I have to read up a little more on the NRCS methodology. I believe the majority of it is done in kind of a more like an aerial or mapping, and I don't think every single speck of soil they've had, boots on the ground walking it, because that would just be a lot of time. But in our reviews, if it's ever complicated or we think, oh, maybe this is good soil and it's not mapped or vice versa, we always can do a site visit and the agency can walk the land and either say they're better or not as good as mapped based on the site specific analysis. So the desktop review is a starting point. But there's always the opportunity for more of a actually walking the land and doing a test pit and looking at soil strata. So
Thanks.
yeah, thank you for that.
How many acres a year do you think we're losing of prime ag land?
You know, again, I'm sorry I don't have these specific numbers in
fine,
front
I
of me,
just-
but I'm eager to definitely get them for you. We are losing soils every year, I can tell you that. We also are mitigating impact, so that's kind of the silver lining or the other side of this. And
Talk about that a little bit.
yeah, let me talk about the mitigation because under Act 250 at least, and of course, not all land in Vermont is subject to Act the jurisdiction. There's non-jurisdictional land, so it's not capturing everything, but at least for projects that are under Act 250 jurisdiction, the agency is a statutory party under Act 250 criteria 9B. So when there is development that meets those triggers of Act 250, there's a number of triggers, but a common one would be construction of improvements for a commercial purpose on a tract of either over 1 acre or over 10 acres, depending on what the town has permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws, or there's some nuances that the land use review board would be the best to speak to. But if you have a jurisdictional tract of land, we are a statutory party, the Agency of Agriculture, under that proceeding. So we review we work with developers and project consultants, engineers and landowners to we encourage them to reach out to us either before they apply ideally or once they have applied if needed to submit site plans and to determine how many acres are being impacted of these primary ag soils. Or are certain soils maybe no longer meet the definition, they've already been impacted. And then based on how many acres are being impacted, under Act 259B, there's a section of the law, Title 10, 6093, it's the section that's called Mitigation of Primary Agricultural Soils. And it's a pretty robust framework where if you're doing jurisdictional development under 250, you need to mitigate at least double or up to triple as much as you impact. If you're outside of a designated area as defined in that section of statute, there are certain designations where you can be eligible for 1-to-1 mitigation ratio, or even no mitigation in certain scenarios, like for density plus affordability covenants. There's a few specific provisions like that, but overall, there are multipliers required by statute between 2 and 3. So let's just say you're impacting 5 acres of primary agricultural soils, you might need to mitigate 10 acres.
How they mitigate?
Yeah, great question. So you mitigate either on-site, which means setting aside land on the project tract for present and future agricultural use by permit condition issued by the commission. So it would be like, okay, I'm impacting 5 acres here, but I have 10 acres of equally good or better land here. I'll set that aside for present and future agricultural use by permit condition, so it can't be otherwise developed or used.
You're
for-
just conserving land that you'd want to conserve anyways, and we just didn't allow people to build on it to begin with.
That's one way to look at it. I mean, and you know, in some cases, it's land that might otherwise be used for a project. I mean, there are tracts that are out of land that don't have room for on-site mitigation, or that don't want to mitigate on-site because they want to save that land for future development. So yeah, I mean, there are pros and cons to on-site mitigation, but it is a way to ensure that soils remain available for present and future ag use. The other kind of mitigation is off-site mitigation, which is typically a fee to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, VHCB, which VHCB then leverages along with other funds, sometimes federal matching funds, sometimes state or locally available funds. So VHCB takes those funds, which again already usually have a multiplier applied to the impact acreage, unless it's in a designated area where it's 1-to-1. They then take those funds and leverage them with matching or other funds, and purchase conservation easements for permanent protection of agricultural soils in the same geographic region. So it's not going to be always on the same tract of land if they're using an offset mitigation fee, but it is going to be in the same region, and VHCB really conserve some excellent soils and kind of large tracts of historically important or recently important farmland. So that's kind of a dollar figure that's calculated using a recent cost of conservation per acre based on VHCV closings. So offset mitigation is also a really important tool to mitigate farmland loss. It's in many cases depends, but some applicants actually prefer it, and others prefer on-site mitigation. I've done a variety of factors.
But you're not taking suspicious land, only suspicious being that it's not probably, it's 11, 12. You're not putting ditches in or doing whatever to make that land less wet or more desirable. You're not actually taking secondary lands and trying to turn them into prime ag lands when you're talking about mitigation. You're just kind of swapping lands out here or there.
Are you asking whether the developer themselves would try to make land better to make it suitable for mitigation, or whether
Or to make lands, I mean, you've got this field that's always been historically wet. There's a spring in the center of it or whatever. You're not going into those and diverting out. And the only reason it's wet is because there's a spring there. You're not going in there and diverting that water so that it could become prime ag soils again or be able to get on there. You're not mitigating it. You're not taking land that is less desirable and making it better by doing some type of ditching or switching or something.
right? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, that's certainly making land better for agriculture is always encouraged, assuming it complies with the required agricultural practices. But that's not really the framework for mitigation under the statute. So it's encouraged, but wouldn't count toward your mitigation acreage unless it otherwise was kind of mapped as being statewide or prime or active ag use soil. But so that'd be a positive thing, but not necessarily typically done in the framework.
And from what I've seen from this, say you had a farmer that had 30 acres and he's trying to develop it, or let's take less, say 10, and it's ideally right at the edge of town.
Yeah.
And it had to activate 250 for Act 250 for any of this to come into play, and it does. But he doesn't have any land to mitigate.
Right.
Is there any way that they can work around that? Because it's been in the family farm, they've decided they finally we're not farming it anymore, it is prime ag, but this is the way the town's moving, this is the ideal, it makes sense. After all the studies, that this is the way we're gonna go. But now you get hung up in the Act 250, well, geez, you've got this 10 acres, but either you only develop a little bit of it, but the town wants all of it, because that's the right thing to do to expand the town.
Mm-hmm.
Is there ways around that, or is it set in stone and you're locked in that you can't get the compensation land,
Right.
or can they pay?
So that's exactly. So thanks for the question. So that's where if someone either does not have enough land for mitigation, or they do have the land but want to use it for housing or a business or some other land use, that's where an offset mitigation fee to VHCB might come into play, depending on the facts. We also have a de minimis threshold. So if you're really just only impacting, let's say, half an acre, that might fall below the de minimis threshold. So it's not like every speck of soil we're requiring a big onset mitigation area. There's kind of a practical approach. If after you develop something, with the multipliers, less than 2 acres mitigation is calculated, we consider that de minimis, and we still might require mitigation at a future time once you kind of reach that threshold, but might defer it to kind of not wind up in a lot of tiny mitigation areas. We want to kind of have viable mitigation land. But yeah, in some scenarios, that's where a developer or a landowner might propose to pay an offset mitigation fee to VHCB to mitigate that impact. If it's jurisdictional, the other thing is that there are areas that are non-jurisdictional or certain types of projects that don't even require jurisdiction. So,
Well, what happens in this case is you may have like a traditional farmer who's been doing it for years, and they feel that's extortion because it's like, I worked this land for the last 30 years, right? I bought it and now I paid taxes on it, and now I want to do what I planned on. And the only way I can do this, it just put it out there that a lot of farmers, a lot of landowners go, it almost feels like extortion that Act 50 holds us over our head, that if we can't have other lands, and I don't know what we can do about it. That's really not in your department, but I wanted to just say that.
Well, I appreciate the concern. Yeah. It's definitely balancing a lot of factors, so it is complex. Yeah, I appreciate that all the work farmers do to keep the soils excellent. So thank you. And so yeah, I mean that's kind of the general framework as far as onset mitigation, offset mitigation fees, which are used by DHCB, and they've conserved a lot of incredible farms throughout Vermont. Every district of activity with those funds. And then we have the section 248 side of things, including solar development that meets certain thresholds. And under section 248, we have some colleagues as well in the room with a lot of knowledge there. But there's kind of two main strategies used. One is that reclamation. So I mean, there's a whole suite of permit conditions that are kind of recommended or required as a condition of a certificate of public good for solar projects that kind of meet the section 248 threshold criteria. So requiring not increasing the bulk density of the soil unduly, making sure you avoiding an undue adverse impact by not compacting the soil too much. So requiring pre and post disturbance soil testing to avoid that compaction outcome, because compaction can really do a number on soils. Conditions about how the machinery goes on the site, and how trees are grubbed, and there's a whole suite of recommended permit conditions to kind of address putting it back the way you found it. So yes, the land will be used for solar for a certain period of time, but ultimately under the law, those soils, once the site is decommissioned, are still considered to be primary agricultural soils. So making sure that you put it back the way you found it, for lack of a better phrase. And then there are some types of impacts that can be associated with section 248 that may be permanent, especially if it's like a transmission station or a building that's being put down on the ground with a foundation that might not be decommissioned. So, temporary impacts can be reclaimed, at least in an ideal world, to be primary ag soils again. The permanent impacts, the section 248 team has been recommending offset mitigation fees to the HCB in that context as well. So kind of a similar framework to the Act 250 mitigation under criteria 90 I described, where the multipliers are applied between 2 and 3. So we're actually conserving more land than we lose, at least in an ideal world, as far as the jurisdictional projects, and multiplying that by the recent cost per acre in that region. So those are under section 240, again, kind of reclamation, putting it back how you found it, a lot of nuances and technical aspects there, paying a fee if it's not temporary, and then kind of ultimately that at least for the solar panels themselves, the decommissioning rule requiring these soils, in a legal sense, become primary ag soils again once it's all complete. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Ariaga, in a similar vein, I had that same word in my brain when you asked your question about, in essence, I guess if you make it as simple as about paying to pollute, I mean, it's the same sort of principle. And in terms of, for instance, the Vermont State Fair in Rutland, again, I keep going back to this 3-acre rule, but they're surrounded by very challenging mitigating circumstances. They have a road, they have a state road at one end, they have a railroad at the other end, and they have privately owned land on the other two sides. And so in order for them to come into compliance, they could pay a fee.
Mm-hmm.
I call it a fine or a penalty or however you want to phrase it. And I asked this of Peter Sterling earlier. I'm just curious whether your agency has any idea of solar panels that have been on prime ag land and they keep saying that the life of the panel is about 25 years. So, okay, say there's been something there 26 years. How much of that land has been returned to prime ag by taking the panel off and taking it away and reintroducing methods to use it for farmland again? Do you have any idea about how much acreage we're talking about?
I don't have a specific figure. We certainly could get that for you.
Hasn't happened.
I would
Well,
bet
that's, that, I
zero.
was gonna say,
I would bet a zero.
I mean, to be fair, yes, so this whole topic of solar is in the scheme of human history relatively new. So I do think we're somewhat, trailblazing here and that we are, hopeful that it all will be returned to kind of a pre-disturbance PAS primary ag soil state. In reality, not all of it has yet. So I guess there is a bit of a question mark in the future. But we hope that at least these legal protections provide durable protections to make sure that we don't totally lose these soils in the future, and that they're treated as ag soils in future proceedings. But yeah, it's not easy, and balancing a lot of different interests, kind of landowner rights and private property rights with the importance of these soils and the farmer viability and renewable energy and business interests. So it's a lot of different balancing act. Yeah.
And to the chair's point earlier, and he's been repetitive of this, which I appreciate. This committee is concerned with farmers farming, and not politics to the greatest extent possible. But I think we all see a difference between putting a solar panel up on that hill there, and that's not disturbing any prime ag land that I'm aware of.
Right.
I mean, I don't know, it's 15-20%, and it's rocky,
Right.
and it's hilly, and it's tough to do, versus a complete flat land that.
Sorry about that.
It's not good.
One bone. So anyway, I make that distinction because I think there is a difference between if there's a panel up there,
Right.
I don't care if it stays there for the rest of its life, I guess.
Right.
Although I'm not convinced that they don't leak or leach or there's some sort of negative environmental impact at some point. If it's 26, 27, now it's 30 years and.
Or maybe they should comply with a 3-acre rule, right? Water
Yeah,
dripping on it.
I don't know.
Well,
I'm just curious,
Right.
but I just wanted to make that point. We're concerned in here with farming
Yes.
and not necessarily other.
Right.
Aspects.
Prime farm
Yeah.
land that is being taken for other uses other than growing food or
Yeah.
what have you in perpetuity. And what happens when, okay, well, I get it. It's only, again, repetitive, but I'm okay with repetitive to make it be. But, I mean, if we start, we're only losing this amount of land every year. Well, there comes a time when there's no more land.
Right.
It's time.
Yeah, they're not making any new stuff.
And who is it?
Yeah.
Who is it gave us responsibility for 300 years ahead of time for us to make that decision?
So that's a fair concern and point, and I share your concern for the soils and the farmland. And I agree they're not making any more. It's a finite resource, so I think it's underscores the importance of this conversation. And there are certain preferred sites or kind of preferable sightings. And at the same time, a bit flatter land that's already cleared has fewer costs and barriers to being used. Can require cutting down fewer trees. So it's a balancing act. But I think it's a valid point. Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else? Committee. Yes, sir.
If I may, Alex DeCoste with the Agency of Agriculture. These projects must be decommissioned except in the case of something that's permanent and is not even proposed to be decommissioned or doesn't have to be decommissioned, like a substation. So it will be decommissioned, and there is bankruptcy remote money to do that. So if a company goes bankrupt, the PUC can reach in, public utility can reach in and grab the money to decommission it.
How many have happened, sir?
Say again?
How many have been decommissioned?
There are almost no examples I've been able to find. We're tracking a case now in California that's being decommissioned.
Okay. And
And-
Vermont really is what we.
And yeah, well, it's the same construction,
Right.
it's the same kind of posts, same kind of thing. So yeah, it's an open question. And I look at those decommissioning estimates and I'm not exactly sure how to evaluate them. That's a good question for the Department of Public Service, who really bird dog those things. And what that letter of credit or whatever it's going to be, what that looks like. So they watch that pretty carefully. Be good to talk with them.
I'm not sure I understand exactly. It sounds like a legal term, decommissioning. I don't know what exactly that means.
Well, Ari said reclamation, so everything's got to come out, got to
Okay.
all go back the way it was.
So the
To
metal,
the greatest degree practicable, I think is the.
well, I'm sure that's what we use, because we always use
We
that.
like practical.
Yeah.
Favorite word in terms, right? Yeah.
But there's cement foundations in there, I think, for some of the panels, and then these metal, no,
Yeah, it's all driven posts. They're like guardrails, but smaller.
okay,
Picture a guardrail post. Pound them in. And the only concrete might be for a small on-site substation for
Right.
almost like it's like an electric conversion before you actually send it to the grid. Most of the time, a lot of these projects, what I'm seeing, and again, we review it to make sure that we think it can be decommissioned. So a lot of the time what I'm seeing is actually, again, posts with that electrical conversion equipment on the posts. Sometimes a bigger project, they'll have a kind of on-site substation. Roads, gravel with geotextile underneath. You know, again, we are trying to ensure that whatever is altered there can come out. Gravel comes out, geotextile comes out, soil goes back down. Stockpiles of soil separated by layer. Layers have to go back in the same order they were originally.
okay. Are there other guardrails or requirements? So Peter seemed to, and I don't mean to put words in his mouth or mischaracterize what he said, that when the panels come out, they're just sort of stored like in a barn or a building somewhere. But I'm not sure that. So when you say decommission, does that mean only that it comes off that land, but we don't really care about what happens to the panels afterward?
No, in the decommissioning, when you read the decommissioning document, it always says stuff has to be disposed of in accordance with the law. So whatever that means, I don't know. Again, it'd be a good question for the Department of Public Service to say, and we've had discussions with Renewable Energy Vermont and other stakeholders about panel recycling. So again, this is all pretty new. Panels are getting recycled.
They are.
Yes,
Okay.
there's enough projects out there that are that old. I have not found the decommissioning budgets and numbers and actual figures, but there are old enough panels out there that the recycling thing has started.
We have had some,
That's good to know.
we've had, actually, think about it, we've had small sack complete scrap here.
Oh, okay, yeah.
All we do is compact them, send them down, and they recycle them.
So you just kind of chew them up and.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Well, good. Anyone else? Everybody good?
Yeah.
Pretty good?
Yep.
So I want to thank everyone, especially the committee, for, digging into this. And, I'm sure we're gonna have some more thoughts and some ideas and some more questions. And, as we move forward, if they sees which direction we're going, it can offer us any assistance. We're very much with that. We just want to make sure that, we have no proposed language of anything that we're trying to do. We're just looking at the aspects of how much land do we have? It's prime ag land. How much are we losing in a year and when does it run out?
Right.
And that's kind of where this discussion is headed in that vein. And, that's where we're at. Committee's got it.
Thank you.
Yeah, the committee's got any other thoughts on that? Nope. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for your time. Great question. Appreciate your concerns you raised and considerations. So
Yeah.
thank you. Happy to come back.
Thanks,
At
Eric.
some point, yeah.
So we thank you all, and unless the committee's got anything else, but then we'll